Hello and welcome to our second webinar for a simple audio visual guide to your event. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gemma. I'm the sales manager here at the Christian Conference Trust and look after the Hayes and Highley conference centres. We're joined today by guest David. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm David. I'm from Hilltop Audio Visual, which is a company that specialises in installing and supporting churches with their AV needs. So we go from the very start, from really realising a church's needs in the AV area, and then all the way through from installation to maintenance to developing it into their day-to-day church life.
Brilliant. So today what we're going to cover is understanding your AV needs for your event, getting the most out of your equipment which is already included, and then we're going to finish up on 5 quick tips for AV success for your event. Where do you start when you start thinking about your event and AV needs? Like, where do you begin with all of this?
So you really want to start with at the same time as you're planning the beginning of your talk, really, whether it's you've got a speaker coming, you need to be thinking about that at the same time, because you don't want to have spent all that time planning a brilliant event only to find that you forgot to check whether there was microphones there, and so you can't be heard at the back, and you've spent a good half an hour getting that PowerPoint slide absolutely perfect, and then actually you end up having to describe it because you haven't got the right connector to connect your laptop into the system.
Yeah, and how does that change dependent on the type of event you're running? If you're running multiple events for different sizes and different variations of people, what do you need to consider for those different types?
Yeah, so your target audience is really important for a start. So, is it a younger demographic or an older demographic? If it's an older demographic, you need to be bearing in mind the fact that they are more likely to be wearing a hearing aid and relying on an induction loop.
Yeah.
So when you're doing that, you need to make sure that everybody can use a microphone. So if you've got a Q&A going off, making sure that everybody can use a microphone to ask a question.
Yeah.
That's very important because, hearing aid users, just for a bit of information really, hearing aid users need to have the sound coming through a microphone, or they just won't hear it.
Yeah.
So a question coming from the stage is fine, but a question coming from the audience, if it's not mic'd, they just won't hear it.
Yeah.
The other thing, like you say, is the size of a venue, how many people you've got.
Yeah.
Because you might want something a bit more intimate for a small meeting, which can just be a microphone on a stage. But then if you've got a big panel, something like that, you want to be able to have multiple microphones so that it's not being passed around left, right and centre and looks quite unprofessional. And
I think considering which venue you're using and what's your meeting room like, what's the acoustics like in that room, what basic AV is already in that room. So checking out your venue, come and have a look round. I know the Hayes and Highley were always open to having people in to look at the space, trial what you want to bring in and use that space as well, and just making sure that you're aware of all of that pre-arrival of the day of your conference to stop any of those little hiccups happening.
Absolutely.
And what would you say is, like, if I was like, okay, I want to think, what are the basics that I need to bring for this event? Where would I start with my basic AV equipment that I'm bringing along? Yeah.
So really, if you want your sort of tick list before you head off, you want to be able to have visited beforehand and check that, I want a microphone. They've got microphones, they've got that so I can be heard, and they've got a sound system and an induction loop, which you're great at supplying as part of your conference bundles. But actually, when you're bringing it, you want your laptop.
Yeah.
With that PowerPoint slide that you've spent so long making. And actually sometimes it's always good to have a USB stick with you so that if your laptop fails, you can plug it into somebody else's. Always useful to have.
Always have a backup.
Absolutely, yeah. And then also you want to be able to make sure that all of your audio stuff is, you know what's going to happen beforehand, so that if you are, you know what type of speaker you are.
Yeah.
So whether you are somebody who prefers to move around, or whether you're going to be somebody who likes to stand and work off notes. Those kind of things are the kind of things that you need to know beforehand.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thanks, David. That's really helpful. So here at Christian Conference Trust, in our main meeting rooms and our syndicate spaces, we have so much basic AV equipment that's already included. Things such as your microphones, your PA systems, your screens are all included, that we have available for you to use. So what we want to talk about during this segment is how do you get the most out of that equipment that's already included in your package without having to add that additional cost on. We will also cover a slight segment which are, if you want to add on additions to that, what's available to you and how you do that.
Looking at sound systems, there's lots of complexity that we can get into, but let's keep it simple to start with. We'll start with a single speaker on the stage. They just need a wired microphone on a stand, and the reason I say wired is because there's less chance of a battery dropping out halfway through or things like that.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it as simple as we can. So we've got a microphone stand at the front, you know, you've got your notes, and that way you can, if you want to be a bit dynamic, you can take it off and wander around the stage.
Yeah.
But actually, at the end of the day, you can stand there and present, and you're going to be heard by everybody. If you've then got something a little bit more complex, like a panel, really you want to be able to have your host keeping a microphone.
Yes.
If you can, then have a microphone per person, or a couple down the table, say, because then you don't have to wait for that sort of pass the parcel sort of thing going off, because that, you know, it's really distracting, and also you get the microphone noise as people move it. So really you want to be looking at ideally a microphone per person for those very basic needs, because really you then get into the point where we can have radio microphones. Your larger conference suites have got radio microphones, so use them to your advantage, in the fact that, you know, if you've got questions from the audience, have somebody ready to just go and pass the microphone down the road. Because
and by sort of radio microphone, you mean like not wired in, and that's just pretty much free handheld, and that, how does that connect to your sort of, is it very easy just to switch and go system in there?
Yeah, so I'm sure that you're making sure that you switch it on at the start of your talk. But if you're going to use it for audience participation, you probably won't need it until the end.
Yeah.
So keep it live, but pop it on a stand at the side, away from the stage. And then when you get to the Q&A part, just make sure you've got somebody queued beforehand that they can go and wander around a little bit and do it. With larger events, you might want that you've got somebody on a sound desk who's able to, you know, turn that one down while it's not being used. But it's not going to be the worst case scenario that if you have that microphone live all the time, as long as it's tucked away and not in the way. That's really one of the important things, is that having all of those microphones so that they have a sole use. So you've got that host who has a wired microphone, so if the panel gets a bit rowdy, you know, and everyone's interrupting each other, they can override them and go, right, let's move on to the next subject and move it away, because that's just bearing in mind that, you know, that person needs that microphone all the time. So just
taking control of that event and keeping things on track.
Absolutely, yeah. But then if you're on your own and you're a slightly more dynamic speaker, you might want a lapel microphone, which are great. They're another type of radio microphone, so again, no wires. I've got one here actually. So this part here, this belt pack, goes into your pocket. I always try and pop it in my pocket the same way every time. The reason being is that then I can remember which way the switch on the top there, that is switching. So I tend to put it that where it says mute on the top here, that's away from my audience. So when I switch the switch away from the audience, I'm not heard. And when I'm switching the switch towards the audience, I am being heard. And then this can either go sort of down your jumper, fantastic, and then pop that up, and we use the rule of thumb for where to position it. So you pop your thumb on your chin there, extend your hand, and where that little where your little finger is, that's where it needs to be clipped. Now this jumper's brilliant for it because I can screw it. But if you've got if you've got something a little bit more where, say, a lapel jacket or that kind of thing, just try and keep it there. But if it has to be up, then you just need to do it a little bit higher. So it's just important to have it in that right position and make sure it's on the top. Because if you put it behind a jumper or something like that, you're just not going to be, well, all you're going to hear is muffles, which is never great. I think that's
a great tip. I think that'll be helpful for a lot of people to, sometimes you just sort of in a hurry and clip it on, but it's such a simple, easy hack just to think, okay, that's great, we'll get a good sound. And another thing with a lapel mic, sort of as a woman in the pack, in a dress, like how is, when you've got sort of women speakers, that how do you just clip that? Is there easy just clips or the little things that you can get?
So I mean, this one comes with a belt clip, which is not always ideal. One of those things when we're talking about planning ahead, one of the things you need to be thinking about is what you wear. I always say that when we're leading a service at my church, I might wear something completely different when I'm leading a service to when I'm not leading a service. And actually, so therefore, something that you might want to bear in mind is, where am I going to put this? Am I going to put a belt with my dress so that I can clip it on the back or something like that? The other thing that I do have some people that do is they get a lanyard and just clip it to them on their back there. Because that's just an easy way to tuck it out of the way, turn it on, but do remember that to switch it on before you start your talk.
And I think if you have got a speaker or somebody who's coming in to sort of run that and run the services, understand how they like to present firstly, because they might be a pretty active speaker who wants to be non-wired because they're sort of up and down, they're very active sort of in the audience, they're up and down the corridors, and or you might have a very sort of stationary person who just wants a really simple lectern setup with that. So I think that is a big thing with sound. Understand who you've got speaking and how they like to present as well, and ask them the question. It's not silly to go to them and say, how do you like to present? What would you like? What would you prefer? And understanding that is probably going to give the best sound for the experience for your speaker and for your delegates.
Absolutely.
So,
and the thing is with the speakers is that they will have done a talk loads of times and they'll know what type they are, so it's not going to be something that you pounce on them. They'll know that, oh, I much prefer this or I much prefer that. And actually some speakers will prefer a handheld because it's a comfort thing, the fact that they can walk around and talk, but they've got something to hold. Because I'm one of those people who actually, when I'm standing up on a stage and I've got no lectern, it's quite nice to just hold something as a bit of comfort, but actually I am somebody who also wanders around quite a bit when I'm talking, so actually a wired microphone is no good for me. So it's just, they will know that, so don't be afraid to ask them.
And if you wanted to get a little bit more enhanced with sound, what would you recommend sort of people using? And like obviously the handheld mics and the non-wired mics, things like that, that's all included in our packages, but how could you enhance that if you choose to do so?
So I mean, one of the things that you know we'll be talking about in a bit will be the whole having a band and that kind of thing, which also requires somebody to man the desk, and I think that's important as well. If you've got lots of microphones around, if you've got a big panel of people and you've got somebody doing Q&A and moving things around, then that becomes our big factor of feedback. You know, you've got a microphone wandering around in the same place where speakers are pointing, and that's a big, from a sound technician's point of view, as soon as you say I'm going to bring a microphone into the audience, they go, oh no, because you do need to make sure that you're able to turn things down quite quickly. So that's where you need to be thinking, have I got somebody there to be able to, you know, man a desk or something like that. Also, you know, connecting a laptop, connecting into it music devices, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Planning ahead so that if you've got those things that you need as an illustrative point, or just as a time of ministry or something like that, then you need to be able to access that while you're on stage. If you're a sole speaker, you need to be able to quickly, pop that music on. You don't want to, introduce a time of prayer and then they're stood there for 5 minutes while you're trying to plug a phone in. So just planning really ahead, thinking of, what devices you want to connect to your sound system.
Yeah, no, they're brilliant tips. Thank you. That was fantastic.
As we move to the visual section, we need to be bearing in mind that whenever we want to connect something, the standard connection across all the conference suites is HDMI. Which is the connection that you have on the back of your TV. It's the industry standard now for the last few years. And that's really worth looking at, to the device that you want to bring. Because lots of devices have HDMI, but not every device. Unfortunately, I wish it was that every laptop had one. So you might need a dongle or something like that that will convert from, say, USB-C to a HDMI connection. And it's really important that you just double check that before you come and expect to just plug that straight in.
And I know that here at Christian Conference Trust we've got pretty much most connections to have it covered, but it's always worth just asking the question of the venue that you're using and just thinking ahead, and perhaps even having a little supply yourself as just in case that you're prepared. So it's really important.
They're quite inexpensive, so having one is always worth just having one in your bag. If you've got that laptop and it's your laptop, it's worth having one, because chances are you'll probably want to connect it to something else on another day anyway. So and I mean, the other way of doing it is that we're slowly moving towards wireless connection. It's not fully there yet because not everything is capable of connecting wirelessly, but we're getting there. Certainly with phones and tablets, it's becoming more and more that people want to present from those devices. It's in our pockets, it's in our bags, it's ready to go. So a lot of the that technology is in the AirTame system, which is a good way of connecting wirelessly to it.
And what is AirTame for those similar to myself that wouldn't know where to start with sort of AirTame and things like that? So
it's basically it's a little disc that we put inside the system that receives it over the Wi-Fi network. Dead simple to use. We actually have a link below which has a getting started on the AirTame system. There's lots of similar systems, but they all work pretty much the same. So on an iOS device, you might have come across the AirPlay thing where you beam it across to your TV, exactly the same way that you do it across the conference.
Okay, so super simple, and that's installed in most of our main conference halls at the Hayes and High-Lee, or if not a similar equivalent across the centres. But it's always worth just speaking to a member of our AV team just to make sure that the equipment that you're bringing is actually compatible first. So it's always worth just putting that call in and making sure. So, so what other options are there for AV and sort of visual?
So I mean, really, you want, when we're talking about planning ahead, one of the things is when you're planning your talk, how you're going to use visuals, because we spoke about the fact that we could just put a slide on the up that says what the talk's about. Nice and simple. It means that people, when they walk in, they know what talk they're in, and you're not going to get everybody sat down, you say welcome to this talk, and 5 people walk out because they were in the wrong room. That's not what you want. Never instills confidence, does it?
Definitely.
But actually moving topics in a talk, it's always good to try and put a visual aid behind you, because not everybody's going to be able to sit and listen to a talk for half an hour without them starting to twiddle on their phone and that kind of thing.
Definitely.
So visual aids are certainly something that help us remember what was spoken about, because if there was a certain picture on the background, some people's memory is just all about the pictures. So pop a picture behind you that illustrates your point to start with, and you're much more likely for somebody to remember what you've spoken about a couple of months later down the line.
Definitely, and we leveraged sort of in our last webinar with marketing about the importance of visual aid and having like a hashtag on the screen and things like that to keep people engaged and keep your delegates interacting with what's going on. So it's so important to have that clean, crisp sort of visual aid and things like that to have that able to support. And like you say, it's really simple and easy to connect whether you use the Airtame or you use the equipment, but the key thing in that is just check what you've got before you attend and make sure that you're happy with everything. And we're quite open to people coming and having a site tour and just sort of trial your equipment before you come and have a look what we've got, ask the questions, and we'll make sure that you're happy with everything before you arrive to make sure that you have that perfect visual success.
That's great. I mean, to be able to just do a dummy run of, you know, does my laptop plug into this? So then, you know, even if somebody comes with a laptop that doesn't have it, if you as the organizer have a backup laptop to say, pass me that, put the presentation in my laptop, we can get ready to go on my laptop and run, and that's even better. Definitely. A lot of the conference suites, the larger ones, have an input at the front and at the back. So if you're somebody who likes to move their own slides on during a talk, you can do that at the front. But also if you're somebody who does not like to touch technology, once I've set this PowerPoint up, I'm not touching it during my talk. You know, I've got enough looking through these papers to be able to follow along my own talk. Then, you know, there's an input at the back. The person operating the sound might be willing to just move that presentation along, and again, planning who's going to press that button to say that that's the next slide is really important. And that's, you know, particularly on a big venue, it might be that you decide, actually, I don't want to be operating it because it's a distraction from my topic. Again, keeping it simple, that you want the focus of your talk or your event to be the topic, and not the fact that they spent every 2 minutes they spent tapping the next slide. You know, it's a lot better that they're
100%
out of the way, the technology's out of the way, but actually the visual aid is there to remind people that, oh yeah, they spoke about that and they had a picture of that on the screen. It's really important to think about lots of different ways of accessing the talk and not just listening.
Definitely, and I think in a lot of our, when you are doing larger conference in that visual aid, you've got sort of those breaker screens in the middle as well. So for those that do find it a little bit more difficult to see, you might want to think about the placement of where you're putting people, and also obviously that in the larger conference halls you have got those screens halfway down, just to make it easier for those that do need that additional assistance as well. So that is something that we've got included, but like I say, just come and have a look around and check that it's everything you need, and if not, then give yourselves a call to get that additional equipment in that you need as well. A lot of the conferences that we host at the Hayes and Highley and Christian Conference Trust do tend to often have use of a staging and of a set area. This is most sort of common when using our larger conference halls and not sort of the smaller spaces. So that's something worth considering when you are thinking of the number of delegates that you've got in attendance, and also the conference space that you've actually got to use, thinking about the size of your set and what you actually need. So when you're starting to think about this, and a lot of our groups want to have that staging and a set and quite an impactful sort of welcome, where do you start with this?
When you're looking at, when you first contact you and, you know, start to have a tour of the various different spaces that are available, one of the things that's worth bearing in mind is sort of the area that a band takes up. It's quite deceiving how much room they need. So, for example, if you're looking at a singer, they need a sort of a metre by metre square. But then you go up to having a guitarist, they need 2 metres by 1 metre. And then you've got a keyboardist, they need 2 metres by 3 metres to be. So once you've added all of that space up, plus them to be able to move in and out, it's quite a big area. So bear that in mind, and the fact that, do you want them up on stage while they're doing that? And so, you know, are they going to be the focus of that, or are they something that's happening at the side as accompanying to a talk or a ministry time, and do they, so therefore they can be off to the side? That's really important to bear in mind. The other thing is, making sure that you've got time to do a sound check.
Yes.
Because you don't know who's been in the building, in that space beforehand. It could have been a band which was exactly identical to yours, or it could have just been a person with just one microphone at the front. And you need that time to be able to know that you can plug things in. So per instrument, you know, instruments need to be able to be plugged in via a DI box. And that's really one of the things that you need to be considering, is the fact that, you know, you need somebody who's able to do a sound check, so stood at the back with the mixer, so that they can set up a channel. One of the things that at Hilltop we're quite passionate about is making sure that we've got, you know, simple videos to just walk you by. So we do lots of YouTube videos about setting up a channel for a band and that kind of thing. Keeping it really simple. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but it can get your instruments sounding good, get your vocalists sounding good, and that's really important, really.
Definitely.
And allowing that time so the pressure isn't on the person that, you know, 10 minutes before the event's meant to start, suddenly all the band turn up. You don't want that.
No, definitely not. And we will include those links for people as well, about, because that's really helpful for a lot of our conferences that are considering bringing a band with them. And from an equipment point of view, where do you start? What do you bring with you? What, like, you're at the beginning stages, you're thinking, I'd really love that to happen for my event, but what equipment do I need to even begin with?
So really what you need to look at is start by counting the number of instruments and also the number of people. That's how many channels you need. It's a rough guide, but it gets you about there, because most people who play an instrument also want to sing. Even if they're not leading, they will want to sing along as well and be heard. So bear that in mind for your channel numbers. Hopefully it's just worth contacting the person who's going to be playing to make sure that their guitar, they have the ability, they have a lead with them. Most people will have a lead that will link into a DI box, which is included with all of the larger systems. So you can plug in a DI box, and then from then onwards, it's about having that person at the back with the sound system, being able to mix that. But everything else, bring your instrument, bring a lead, and then that's really the sort of what you need to provide. And then if you do need any assistance in setting a channel up, you know, we're quite happy to be alongside them to help on the actual day, or we can provide the videos to be able to do that.
The easy links, and I mean, we've got sort of an on-site team that can support with that, and they've got sort of basic knowledge, so they've got knowledge of our equipment and like the plug-in box and things like that, and what we've got available. But again, it is just check before you attend and make sure you've got everything you need. But so I think when you're doing that band, the staging size is really important as well, isn't it? So thinking about, it's like you've said before, is there enough room for everybody, and where are they actually going to go, and is actually the band that you've chosen too big? Do you need to cool them down a little bit? So considering all of those factors.
I mean, the other thing is, if you plan your whole, if you're having an event which is you know, a block of worship and then a talk and then a block of worship again, is there enough space for all of those people to go and sit back down again when they finish performing, or are they going to stay there? The disadvantage of them stay there sometimes is the fact that, you know, they're stood there not doing anything, you know, they become a distraction to the person leading the talk. So, you know, it's just bearing in mind, planning ahead, where are they going to sit when that's done, because making sure that space, there is enough room for all of your delegates, but then also the people who are taking part in the upfront stuff for part of it is important.
Definitely. No, that's a really good tip. Thank you.
So tip number 1 is looking at your microphone usage. It's really tempting to hold it like a heart monitor here against your chest, but actually pop it out in front of you about a foot's distance or 30 centimeters. That way you can use it, and you don't have to project your voice right the way to the back. As long as your front row can hear you, then this microphone can hear you, and then the microphone's doing the rest of the work to be able to make sure that the back row can hear you too.
Tip 2 is no matter how loud you think your voice is, always use a microphone. There will be people at your event that won't be able to hear you, but that will want to be included in your event that won't want to say anything. So make sure you've got that microphone handy and that you are asking those questions pre-event of people's needs in advance.
And tip number 3 is no more than 8 lines on a slide. It's really tempting sometimes to have a big heading and then loads of text at the bottom, but nobody's going to be able to read it at the back. And the last thing that you want is partway through your talk somebody coming to try and take a photo of your slide. It's going to be really distracting. So 8 lines on that slide. If you need more, put it into bullet points and put it on each different slide. It's really useful just to stick to that 8 lines rule.
Tip 4 is always have a holding slide available on your screen during breaks before the beginning of your conference, so that people know when they enter the room what session they're there for, what time the break finishes, and what's coming up next in your conference.
And finally, tip number 5, that AV doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be complex. It can be as simple as making sure you've got a microphone to speak into, and that you've maybe put some images on a PowerPoint slide beforehand to keep people engaged all the way through your event.
Thank you for watching our AV webinar. I hope that you took away lots of useful tips. If you do have any further questions, you'll see myself and David's details displayed on the screen, so feel free to get in contact with us and ask us any requirements that you might have for your AV for your event, and any other AV requirements you might have, feel free to reach out to David and he'd love to help. Thank you so much for watching today and have a great day.